Welcome back to the channel. I'm here for a ride on Mount Seymour, and if you're wondering what this weird contraption is on my helmet, it is a dual camera mount because today I'm going to test out the latest cameras from DJI and GoPro. I have the Action 5 Pro and the Hero 13. I'm going to do a couple laps, test out some different settings, and I want you guys to let me know which camera you think delivers the best POV mountain bike footage. Full disclosure, DJI asked me to do this comparison and provided both cameras as well as a small commission to make this video, but they've had no input into the content itself. I'm going to show you some back-to-back and side-by-side video comparisons, starting with both cameras in their default settings with no editing. So what did we learn from test number 1? If I slow this section down, the footage from the Action 5 Pro looks noticeably crisper. It's able to shoot this scene with a higher shutter speed and the stabilization is working well despite suboptimal lighting conditions. The Hero 13 meanwhile is pretty blurry, and while I like a bit of motion blur to create a sense of speed, it's a bit excessive here and there's also some jitters as the stabilization falters. Now motion blur is just one factor in overall image quality, and when I finally found a clear shot from the Hero 13, I noticed a big difference. Take a look at the tire tracks just ahead of the bike and you can see how much more fine, granular detail is in the Hero 13 footage, while the Action 5 Pro footage looks kind of muddy and almost cartoon-like. Now this is really interesting because that does not represent the capabilities of the Action 5 Pro, as you'll see after the next clip. Now for test number 2, I'm going to use custom settings for each camera to capture a more raw, unprocessed image, which gives me more flexibility when it comes to editing and color correction. Whoa. Blew a pedal. So what did we learn from test number 2? Well, first off, the Action 5 Pro footage looks much better when filming with the D-Log-M color profile and noise reduction turned off. It still produces a crisper image with less blur than the Hero 13, but now it also takes the edge in detail. These differences are even more pronounced further down the trail when it gets darker, and the Hero 13 footage becomes blurrier, noisier, and less detailed because it uses a smaller sensor. Now, one issue I noticed with the Action 5 Pro is that it sometimes has this flickering between light and dark exposures, something I did not notice on the GoPro. Next, let's look at some low light footage. Both cameras are back in their default settings and the footage is unedited unless indicated. The wall ride never really works. It's pretty obvious which camera performs better in low light. Straight off the camera, the Action 5 Pro footage is brighter, with more detail in the shadows, less noise, less blur, and less jitter. DJI switched to a new, larger sensor, while GoPro hasn't updated their sensor in a few years, so no surprises there. The Action 5 Pro could be better though. Once again, the default settings seem to smudge the details, and I find this footage almost too bright given how dark the conditions were. I think filming in D-Log-M with -0.3 EV comp and noise reduction turned down a bit would do the trick. Now, in case you're wondering what happens if I just boosted the shadows in post on the GoPro footage, well, it definitely looks brighter, but it still doesn't fix any of the other issues. Here's a little bonus low light footage, and as you'll see, the darker it gets, the more obvious the differences are between the cameras. The dark path to the outhouse and back. This comparison is hilarious because you can barely tell that the GoPro is filming until my car lights flash. Now let's compare field of view. Here I'm using the Hero 13 in Hyperview, which is the widest field of view using their standard lens. And here's the same scene filmed in the Action 5 Pro's widest field of view called Ultra Wide. If we compare them side by side, you can see that the Hero 13's Hyperview has a taller field of view and captures more footage at the top and bottom of the screen. Both the cameras appear to have similar horizontal field of view, although it's hard to tell because the offset from my helmet mount. I actually prefer Hyperview in the sense that seeing more bike and horizon makes the footage look more dynamic, gives you some leeway when setting your camera angle, and creates more motion blur along the edges, which makes it look like you're going much faster. The downside is noticeable distortion. If I pan across my bike with DJI's Ultra Wide, there is minimal distortion even at the edges of the screen. If I try that same thing with Hyperview, it actually makes me feel nauseous because there's so much distortion. Now, this effect is far less pronounced when you're riding, but it's still noticeable, especially when the bike moves towards the sides of the shot. Next, let's compare audio. Both cameras are set to record in their highest quality settings with wind reduction on. Wood looks very green. Leaves and pine needles too. No thank you. Wood looks very green. Leaves and pine needles too. No thank you. To my ears, the Action 5 Pro does a noticeably better job of cutting out wind noise without filtering out too many natural sounds. The GoPro has a bit more bass, which I really like, but its digital wind reduction sounds unnatural, almost like you're riding underwater. To be honest, both DJI and GoPro need to design a built-in physical windscreen because digital wind reduction kinda sucks. Now let's talk about a few other points of comparison. In terms of price, the Action 5 Pro is $50 cheaper than the GoPro, starting at $349 USD. It has a slightly smaller form factor and also includes the magnetic quick release mount, which works extremely well and lets you take your camera off without affecting your mounting angle. GoPro now offers a similar magnetic mount, but it's sold separately, and I've heard reports that it rattles. For this video, I actually used an adapter from Ulanzi that lets you mount the GoPro to DJI's magnetic mount. DJI also includes a protective frame which lets you mount the camera vertically for social media clips, while GoPro doesn't offer anything and you need to rely on third parties. The Action 5 Pro uses front and rear OLED touchscreens that are larger, brighter, more vibrant, and noticeably more responsive than those on the GoPro. When I tested the Hero 12 earlier this year, I said it almost felt like a cheap knockoff because of how unresponsive it was, and unfortunately that still applies to the Hero 13. DJI's camera is quicker to boot up, start recording, and turn off. The GoPro actually froze for almost 30 seconds when I tried to turn it off to record this clip, and as someone who experienced glitches with multiple GoPro cameras in the past and lost once-in-a-lifetime footage because of that, it's pretty disappointing that their latest camera doesn't seem to be much different. Both cameras now use high-capacity batteries, but DJI also uses a more efficient processor, which lets it record for up to 170 minutes in 4K 30, while the GoPro gets around 110 minutes. The Action 5 Pro also includes 47 gigs of internal storage on their camera, a very convenient feature if you forget your SD card at home. Something unique to the GoPro is that they now offer 3 lens mods: macro, wide angle, and anamorphic. Now for mountain biking, the wide angle, or max lens mod as they call it, is the only relevant lens, but it does sound very cool and I would like to try it in the future. Now, which camera would I recommend? Well, as I mentioned at the beginning, DJI sponsored this video, and with sponsorship involved, I don't think you can ever be truly unbiased, so it's hard to give a fair recommendation, but here it goes. If I were to go out and buy a camera right now, I'd take the Action 5 Pro because it does a better job in low light and high contrast situations, which I encounter far more often than bright blue skies. It packs way more useful features, and so far it hasn't glitched on me like the GoPro has. I do hope that DJI releases another firmware update to optimize the image quality though, because I don't think they've reached the potential of their new sensor and processor yet. When it comes to GoPro, I just feel like they haven't made any significant upgrades to their camera in a few years, or at least ones that are relevant to me as a mountain bike content creator. The Hero 11, 12, and 13 are basically the same. They use the same small sensor and slow processor, and I just don't feel like giving them my money until they release something that really wows me. That being said, if you're buying an action camera in 2024, they're all pretty darn good, and you just need to pick the one that best suits your needs.